appears I am live. At least it says I'm live. There we go. Hey, looks like I'm live. Hi. Hi, everybody. It is me. We are going to be starting the live show in a few minutes here. Thanks for joining. I think we got the lighting about right. This is the time when I get the, we have to make things look a little bit better at least. That's reasonable. That's reasonable. If you are at pedalshift.net/live, one of the things that you can do to help your experience is to enjoy the chat box. Now, the way you do that is shadows. Okay, the lighting's amazing tonight. The way that you do that is that you go to the YouTube page, and you can do that just by clicking in one of those fancy little arrowy things. You can tell that I'm very prepared for this as I get going. If you are in the chat box, then we can say hi and communicate and things like that. So thank you. You will notice that we are here at the cabin in West Virginia. It is a good spot to do it. I'm gonna do a little wardrobe action here now that I see myself. Pro tip before you do live shows, look in a mirror. Look in a mirror. There we go. That looks reasonable. Let's see, we've got about 5 of us here in the room, and we're gonna be firing up the show in about 4 or 5 minutes or so. So bear with me. I'm gonna be fixing this hotspot that is on my fancy screen. Oh, did you see that change? Pretty cool, huh? Okay, I hate that hotspot, so I gotta move this. The wonders of live television, or whatever we're calling this these days. All right, Vincent LaGreco, hello sir, greetings and salutations. Thanks for joining, really appreciate you coming in. If you are in the chat box, feel free to chime in, because this is a good time, because I'm actually gonna be able to pay a little bit of attention during the early morning banter. Byron Patterson, hi Tim, I have to miss the live event, I can't wait to watch it tonight. That is good, and that's a good excuse for me to say, if you can't make it, or if you're watching this later, you already know this, the video will be, of course, available on YouTube after the fact. And then this, of course, is going to be episode number 137 of the show. That will be coming in the feed Thursday, 7 a.m., just like usual. Still going to work a little bit on the lights. I've noticed that sometimes you get a little bit, it's a little hot. It's a little too hot. You wanna make it right. Let's see, what do we got here? How's that? We're working on lighting. We're working on lighting here. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. Paul Culbertson from Vancouver, Washington. You are traveling again, so good to have you back in. Thanks for being a supporter of the show as well. Let's see, bear with me again. You may notice a couple of Easter eggs that I've got going on up here. Of course, I've got my Inex S with the Syracuse S, and then the Bills, because they apparently are good again. If you pay attention to sports. Sports ball. Tonight I'm going to be drinking the tried and true Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Trying not to cast shadows on me. I look like I'm in like a mime troupe with the harsh shadows and everything. I think we're going to try something. Well, that's a little better. That's a little better. So we got Vince, we got Byron, we got Paul. Anybody else who wants to chime in before we get this all rolling? Would love to hear more about you. What's going on here? As I mentioned, I'm here in West Virginia. It is, it's about 68 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you playing the American Fahrenheit game. And it's about 1,000% humidity. It has been the weirdest weather this year. It has just been absolutely ridiculous. They were saying, I was reading in the Washington Post today, that the weather in Washington, D.C., we've had twice as much rain as Seattle this year, which is bananas, absolutely bananas. On this show, we are going to, if this is your first time to a Pedalshift live show, welcome, thank you for joining. If you were a regular, it's gonna be pretty much the same deal as what we've done before, except you've got this fanciness. Oh man, I'm nailing it with the transitions there. So I think it's every 44 seconds. It changes. It's very exciting. What's gonna happen is we're gonna basically, you're here for the recording of the show. So I get to kind of, as the kinder way of saying it is feeding 2 birds with one hand. So there's that. What we do is we do the recording, and the one fun thing is that we got a little bit of the witty banter thing that can possibly happen, so you guys can talk to yourself as I'm sitting here yammering away into this microphone. The other bonus is that at the end of the show, we're going to do a little bonus segment for at least a few minutes. I'm going to actually show you the new touring setup that I'm going to be using for the upcoming tour in the fall that I'm going to be revealing in a few minutes here on the show. So there's that. So there's the extra bonus for coming in live. Thanks so much for joining. We've got enough people in here, I think, and we're at the top of the hour. So I think rather than string it along, I think we're just going to jump right into it. Again, if you are at the Pedalshift page at pedalshift.net/live and want to engage in the witticisms of the chat room, what you'll want to do is you want to click on over to the YouTube page. There's some arrow or something that you can click that gets you there, and then the chat box will be available to you, whether you're on the phone or you're on the tablet or you're on the computer. I feel like that was very Letterman-ish right there. I should be so bold. In any event, we're going to basically go into the show in a moment here. And of course, as you all know, I do a lot of this stuff in post, the welcome music and things like that. So you're not going to hear that. If you want to hear that, it will be available Thursday, 7 a.m. when this becomes an actual podcast, when I do the actual magic of it. Oh, I should mention, speaking of magic, I actually found enough time to get the third part of the trilogy, the Oregon Loop trilogy. It is done, it is ready, and it is out there, and that's also at YouTube. It's also on the front page at pedalshift.net, and go check that out. It was kind of a nice little wrap up to everything. It covers, I think, days 4 through 7, if I recall, so it's basically waking up, getting out to Brookings, getting to the border, and then the whole long journey back using bike and bus. So that was a lot of fun. And if you listen to the show, of course, you know I made it, and obviously I'm here too, so you know. But there's a video, and there's actually a lot of fun stuff that was in that. The thing I like about doing the videos on top of the audio these days is the fact that I'm able to share a few things that there's just no way I could possibly describe on the show, or the journal entries that I do in the field. It just doesn't do it justice. So that's why it's kind of a nice, it's a nice little counterpoint. It's a nice little extra right there. So go check that out. That's on the front page at pedalshift.net. And of course, I'll probably embed it and mention it as a part of this show as well. So it'll be in the show notes for Pedalshift number 137, which we're going to be recording in about a moment now. I'm going to take a sip of this because as I've discovered doing live shows, when you are talking into a microphone doing a podcast, you have no opportunity to drink a beer. So talk amongst yourselves for a moment here. Also, if you're new to this whole thing, I'm going to be looking down. I'm going to be looking down a lot. I'm hopefully going to be catching some of your witticisms as well if you're engaged in the chatting box. You can do that or not do that. It's all good. But it's because I've got show notes here, and that's how I kind of keep track and try not to sound like a yammering mess like I usually do. So we're going to give that a shot. I'm not super happy with the lighting, but I think we're going to go with it because here we are. Wow, we've got Laos checking in. Scott, hello, sir. I think you win the distance prize for this one. We've got, let's see, Vancouver, Washington, Laos, and I don't know where Vince or Byron are checking in, but that is impressive, sir. Thank you for showing up. I love the international flavor. So we'll be starting off. One of the things I got to do is I got to capture what's called room tone. I think I talk about the sausage of you know, making podcasts is sort of like making sausage. I'm not supposed to show you how this is all done. In this one instance, when I do a live show, I actually do have to show this. I do this thing called capturing room tone, and that is a couple of seconds. And what it does is it kind of captures my snoring pugs who are over here. It also captures some of the ambient kind of stuff that's going on and allows me to zero that out for your listening pleasure. So we're going to take a little bit and go from there. Noah Schroer checks in. Hello, sir. He had an error occurred message. We'll keep trying. Not sure what the error is. Hit refresh. Restart your computer, all those other IT things that you're supposed to do. Try that. If this is not working, people should tell me that too, but I'm seeing people staying in the room. I'm noticing that the live thing is still on. It appears that the internets are working, so I'm gonna go with it's working on my end here in the lovely state of West Virginia. So one more sip of beer, and then we're gonna do the room tone, and then we're going to get into the show. So thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you having in here. Feel free to yammer away in the chat box, the usual nonsense. And on the show, well, you'll get the intro in a second. Hold on. Okay. Enough yammering, here we go. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/137, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or call the voicemail hotline. Say it with me, everyone, 202-930-1109, and you can check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody in the chat room. Hello, everybody on YouTube. Hello, everybody in the listening audience. We are live, baby, live for the September 2018 edition of Pedalshift Live. Thanks so much for joining. I am here in wild and wonderful West Virginia alongside my two canine correspondents. So we got Mookie over here. We've got Bellstar over there. If you hear barking or snoring, you know that. Well, you probably hear it on my podcast all the time anyways, because they're frequently around. We've got a group of folks. It looks like we got almost a baker's dozen here in the room. We got folks from all around the world. We got Laos representing. We got the West Coast representing. Thanks so much for joining. This is really a treat to be able to share this with you. On this particular edition of the show, we are going to have a two-spot show. Number one, we're going to be doing the journal, where I am going to reveal my fall tour. It's going to be happening next month. I'm sorry, not next month, from, let's see, it's going to be in November. So a month and a half. Hi, I've had 2 sips of beer and it's very clear. Then we're going to, after I talk about that, we're going to go into a section on gear talk, talking about fall riding tips and especially some gear tips for you as the weather cools, we get some wetter weather, things like that. So we're going to do a gear talk segment on autumnal bike touring gear. So I'm going to check out the chat room right now. If you're on the audio version of this, of course, there's the video version, which is over on the YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm waving. Hi. Let's see. We've got some folks in here. Kim from Southern Ohio. Thank you, Kim, for joining. You're a familiar name. Noah, it works in Chrome. We love technology, don't we? And Brian says hello. So we've got folks from all around the world joining us here for episode number 137 of the Pedalshift Project. Brad Hipwell from Cleveland, Ohio. I've got a fair number of people from the great state of Ohio, the Buckeye State. My brother went to Michigan and he thinks Ohio's stupid. Sorry. I mean, I don't. I mean, it's Ohio. I mean, it's fine. I mean, I'm from Western New York. What am I going to do? What can I say? My brother just is weird about it because of the Ohio State thing. Okay. I've already talked too much. Noah's in Chicago. That's right, Noah. Hello, sir. Let's see. So Vince is from Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. We might as well just everybody chime in with your locale as I enjoy this fine beverage, and we can move on into the next section of the show. I'm likely going to edit some of this out, as you probably can already tell. Park City, Utah. Hi, John. Thanks for joining. I should look up here. See, it's fun because I got you in the box right here on my computer, which you can't see. And here, I can see Brian from Plano, Texas. Plano, Texas. I'll be going to Oklahoma in a few weeks, visiting my girlfriend's family, which of course is not Texas, but you know how it goes. Noah, you look like the most interesting man with that last sip of beer. Thank you, Noah. All right. When we get into Madison, Wisconsin, and I am saying Wisconsin correctly by saying the sconce part, Patrick, as you probably know. I've known a lot of people from Wisconsin. So we're going to jump into the journal next, so give it a moment here. Next up on the show is the journal. The journal, of course, is where we talk about tours, your tours, and on this particular episode, my tours. As seems to be tradition with the live shows, I'm going to make an announcement for the next Pedalshift Grand Bicycle Tour. That seems like a lot more. I'm going to be doing the Great Allegheny Passage on a Brompton in November. This seems to be going with the book ending the sort of bad idea tours that I started the year with, as many of you remember. I did a tour of Washington State in March. That seemed like a great idea. It was fun. I enjoyed the heck out of it, but not the ideal season to do it, and maybe not the ideal bike to do it on. The Gap, the Great Allegheny Passage, starts in Pittsburgh, goes to Cumberland, Maryland. It is one of those kind of cindery trails Not exactly what Bromptons are made for, but they can handle it, and I'll go into the whole why and wherefore on all of this. But I've really been kind of intrigued and enjoying using the Brompton for touring. I've got some modifications that I'm going to be doing. I've got some really cool stuff that's going to be a part of all this. I'm really looking forward to sharing that all with you as well. So how is this going to, how do I tell this story? Well, let's start off by saying how it came about. Have you ever seen those megabus ads? You know, the ones that say, fares from $1, and you never get $1 fare? Well, guess what? I did. I found a $1 fare from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. And then only after I purchased it and plunked down and after a bunch of fees, it ends up being about $4.20. But $4.20 to get from the center of Washington, D.C. to the center of Pittsburgh, that's not bad at all. That's high quality. Then I decided, oh, I should look up what their bike situation is. As it turns out, it's not the best thing in the world. So as a result, the Brompton is likely going to be the bike. Well, the Brompton is the bike that I'm going to be bringing for a variety of reasons. They're not super awesome. It can be done to bring a full-size bike, but the odds of it going south on you much higher than if you've got a folding bike. Hence, bringing the folding bike and basically building a tour all around the fact that I got a $1 bus fare. There are way, way dumber reasons to choose bicycle touring routes, but that's how it's going to be. I decided that the Brompton can handle it after a little bit of research, and by research, I measured the width of the tires. Right now, I am, and I should preface this by saying, I've been real reluctant to take the Brompton on the Gap or the C&O or the Katy for that matter. I'm more efficient on the full-size bike. I've talked about this on some of these other things. You can probably hear Belle Star, by the way, in the background. She's trying to make things fluffier for her. But back to bicycle touring. This is what a live show is all about, people. So I measured the tires, because those are the things that are really the biggest issue. And after last weekend's kind of muddy mess on the C&O, I was really thinking, well, I think that the Brompton tires are just too skinny. And that was always my supposition to do on these trails. Now, granted, the Gap and a trail like the Katy, for instance, they're much better maintained. They don't get quite as muddy or as soft. So you can handle it on a skinnier tire. Lots of people have done it. Well, it turns out when I did the measurements on it, I ride on 38 millimeter wide tires on my touring bike. I used to be on much wider ones when I was riding on those the Schwalbe Marathon Supremes. Now I'm on 38s, and that's just fine, and they're actually on the wide side for a touring tire. Not the widest, of course. I mean, there's people with fat bikes and stuff like that who scoff at the notion of even measuring in millimeters, but I thought, well, if my touring tires are 38s, well, then my Bromptons must be way, 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 way skinnier. And as it turns out, they're 35s. So 3 millimeters. Now, that's probably noticeable under a lot of different conditions, but that was the thing that sort of convinced me that maybe it isn't such a horrible idea. I know that when I've been on the Gap before, I have had complaints, even on super wide tires, in certain sections of it, especially like around Ohio Pile, right when the grade starts to go up just a touch more uphill as you're approaching the Continental Divide. And it's 40 miles before you hit that, but the grade just ever slightly increases, and for whatever reason, that area there, if it's raining, is very, very soft. But I have problems on that with my full-size bike. So if it does happen to rain, and remind me of this because the answer will be, of course it's going to rain those days, it'll probably be a little bit more of a slog on this bike. But there's some other advantages to being on the Brompton. Of course, I'm not going to ride it nearly as heavy. The Brompton itself isn't as heavy. I'm not going to be carrying as much stuff. So there might be some ways where this may be an improvement, but the tire situation is not a reason to say no to it. So that was the idea behind all of this. I decided also, based on some lessons that I learned from my spring tour, which was the very first tour. It's kind of fun that I'm bookending this year with 2 Brompton tours, but I learned a few really valuable lessons on the tour in the spring in Washington State. Interestingly enough, it took this one to really get the first lesson, which was to lessen my mileage expectations. I found that the entire idea of doing a tour on a Brompton was so much better when you are keeping your expectations in check. And what I found when I was in Washington State was I was trying to apply full-size bike mileages to the little clown bike. And the little clown bike is awesome, and I can do it. I did it the first time, in fact, when I did the Big Sur ride. Went all the way from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo on that. But for whatever reason, I think that the idea of doing 60 plus miles a day, which is kind of what my average is on a full-size touring bike, just isn't super realistic. It's possible, but I think that you have to expend a lot more energy. I think that's going to be particularly true on the surface of the Gap. And I know, and Noah, you chimed in here. I think you're totally right. I think it's totally doable. I mean, you said, what did you say? You said you did it on 32s on a hybrid. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that you can do it. It's a question of the effort and the enjoyability of the whole thing. So that's what is kind of my whole idea behind it. The other lessons that I had was to really lighten the load. I have been finding that this year I have been taking less and less stuff, especially clothing. I've noticed that I just wear the same stuff the whole time, which is super gross, but so normal. And I think that I have something that I change into at camp, and then I wear the same stuff the next day. It gets a little rank after a few days, don't get me wrong. And if I'm on a multi-day tour, like a multi-week tour, I'm probably gonna be bringing more changes of clothes. But you know, I can always go to a laundromat if things are super rank. So lessening the load. And when at the end of the show, for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this, go check out the video version because I'm gonna be doing, I've actually got the little clown bike just over here. I'm gesturing for the studio audience that's watching, up on a rack. So I'm gonna be showing sort of what the basic setup's gonna be. I've got actually everything all packed up the way it's gonna look with one minor exception that I'll go through. So you can check out the video for all of that. Another lesson that I had, especially with all the rain and the muck, and this is a lesson actually from this past week as well, is to keep things clean. I think that this bike really suffers when the chain gets grimy. So I am for real this time, because you know I'm terrible with chain maintenance. For real this time, I am going to be much better about keeping that chain and drivetrain chain clean. I had some real problems, I think, after the first tour I did in California. Actually, stuff rusted. It got really kind of gnarly in there, so I'm going to be much better about my chain maintenance on there. The other thing is I'm still going to bring a lock, even though this is a folding bike and I can kind of bring the bike with me. And the reason is that when things are packed on the bike in touring mode, you can't really fold it up and take it with you quite as easily. There are ways to do it. It just isn't very good. And when you get to a place where maybe you want to go into a store to pick up some food or something, the last thing you want to do is have to, all right, I got to put this in a backpack and I got to put that over my shoulder. You want to be able to handle things a little bit differently. So I'm definitely going to still bring a lock. I think that was a really big lesson from the Washington trip as well. Wanted to talk a little bit about the setup. And oh, by the way, Rod Schultz, you chimes in and says, tech casual clothes wash and dry well. Totally agree. I tend to wear and will bring with me things that are, I think Brock on the Sprocket podcast talks about like normal person clothes, and other people as well. This here is something that I will typically bring. Audio people, you'll notice that you can't understand what I'm talking about. I'm gesturing to a wool merino sweater. I'll talk about layering in a little bit as well, but that's the kind of stuff that I like to bring because it tends to be able to handle multiple repeat wearings. I tend to wear a lot of synthetics as well, maybe a base layer. Actually, this is a synthetic base layer right here that I'm wearing. Again, audio version people, you just don't know what I'm doing. I'm showing my undershirt, which is a technical tech wear, made out of basically oil. So yeah, but it dries really well and washes really well. So yeah. And Kim says, any suggestions for camp shoes versus biking shoes? Actually, Kim, I'm going to talk about that in the Gear Talk segment. So definitely. Pivoting to the new setup. In an effort to lighten the load, I'm going to experiment with a new system that 86 is the old style of the backpack on the rear rack trick. For those of you that remember or have been around, I follow the Pathless Pedals, or have followed the Pathless Pedals suggestion, which has served me quite well, of using a full-size backpack on the rear rack. And it does a tremendous job. You can carry so much stuff. I think that that works really well under a lot of circumstances, especially if you're doing a longer tour. If you're flying with the bike, you can actually pack all of your stuff that you can't bring on the plane with you in there. There's lots of good reasons to do it. I'll still do it. I think on this trip, though, I'm going to try something a little bit different. And again, I'll show this to everybody at the end of the show in the after party, I guess that's what I'm calling it now. The lessons from this summer's Oregon trip were really helpful in all of this as I started to shrink things down and got away from panniers. And I've come up with a few ideas here. So here's some solutions. I want to be as waterproof as possible, and I want to be slim, and I want to reduce the amount of packaging. That was the one thing about the backpack, is that it's heavy, it's extra weight, and I've got other types of bags that aren't as heavy. So I'm going to try out a few things with those. So here's some solutions. Number one, I'm going to return back to the Ortlieb pannier on the front trick. That was the original method that I did, and I have sort of my summer version of that I'm going to be showing in the after show, but it's going to be the Ortlieb version with the orange pannier that's waterproof. It's one of the classic roll tops. Holds a tremendous amount of gear. That's going to be mostly for clothing, food, cook kit. It's basically a gigantic front handlebar bag, essentially, because it sits on that luggage block for the Brompton. That's going to be up front. In the back, we're looking to really reduce things down into a couple of bags. So instead of having the one large backpack, I'm going to have two dry bags on the back. Number one is I'm going to have my sleep kit bag, and you've seen that before if you've paid attention to any of the pictures. It's I'm turning over the Event dry bag, which I think they are fantastic. That's one that I really recommend. You're able to push the air out, really cinch it down, and really keep things nice and dry. I've never had a leak in one of those. They're fantastic. I've got two of them. I'm only going to need to use one of them for this. The second thing that I'm going to use is the new orange dry bag that I used for the Oregon trip. So if you saw pictures of the setup for that, check that out. That's also going to be coming with me. That has become the go-to bag for my tent. The nice thing about having a dedicated tent bag is that if things do get wet, then I can keep the wet in with the wet and not have to worry about kind of cross-wetting things or cross-moistening things. I think that has become a pretty good system. That, I think, will make things substantially lighter. I'm going to do a follow-up video, but of course in the after show I'm going to introduce everybody to the whole setup here. And the only thing that I don't have, of course, is the winter version, the fall and winter version. I don't have the Ortlieb on the front luggage block. I've got the summer version of it, which is a non-waterproof setup. But we'll go through all of that and you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So if you're here on the live version of the show, watching on YouTube, or if you're watching the after version, the non-live version on YouTube, it'll be on in a few minutes. The next issue is, am I going to do just the gap? Yeah, yes and no. I think that I should backtrack. I originally wanted to do the entire stretch. I wanted to do a through ride from Pittsburgh to DC. And after I did the muddy trip from hell last weekend, I decided that it's probably not the greatest of ideas to commit to saying, I'm going to go from Pittsburgh to DC in 5.5 days. That would be normally how I would do it on a full-size bike under reasonably good conditions. The C&O has just suffered this year. We've had a ton of storms. It's been super wet. I think I said earlier, either in the pre-show or now, that the Washington, D.C. area has gotten twice as much rain, according to the Washington Post weather folks, than Seattle this year. That's bananas. That's absolutely bananas. So I don't know. That trail, I would like to hit it a little bit more. Man, it's sort of going to be the stretch goal, if you will, of this tour. So as I mentioned, I've got 5.5 days worth of riding. Day one includes the bus, so I'm counting that as kind of a half day. I can only probably get maybe to that very first campsite just outside of Pittsburgh. It's a place called Dravos Cemetery, D-R-A-V-O-S. Dravos, I was told by a local, that's how it's pronounced. It's really cool. It's a Boy Scout campground. It's got like free firewood and lots. It's really awesome. It's a really great place. So that's where we'll probably end up the first night. I've got basically from that point on five additional days to kind of go on the Brompton on all of this. And so this is where I've got bailout points, because I'm assuming that I'm not going to have enough time, that I should reduce my mileage and just sort of enjoy it and just see how it goes. But my, the disaster situation would be if it takes me 5.5 days to go 50 miles. That is not likely, but I do have an opportunity to take the train back in Connellsville. Connellsville is it's about 50 miles down the trail from Pittsburgh. I don't think that's a realistic problem that I'm going to have, but it might be a problem if, for some strange reason, the gap gets closed at Big Savage Tunnel, which is about, well, it's in the mountains. It's much closer on the Cumberland side, but if it's closed, that's a real impediment to getting through. There is a road route, but it is super, super, super not good for biking. It's really a difficult climb, and apparently it's no shoulders and downright dangerous is what I've heard. I've never even thought about trying it. So if Big Savage is closed, it's because there's winter weather, and that's another reason not to go on those roads as well. But if Big Savage is closed, I'll have to take the train from Connellsville, and then this becomes more of a C&O tour, because the next train station is, ta-da, Cumberland, Maryland. So that's if Big Savage is closed and the gap is essentially closed off for me. The next town of note is Cumberland, Maryland. That it would mean that I've done the entire Great Allegheny Passage. That's only about 150 miles. If I average 50 miles a day, that's 3 days. 3 days is a really comfortable amount of cycling to do. I think that I would probably be able to do it in that. I would still have a couple of days to play with. So let's say that I still want to keep going. Instead of taking Amtrak back home from Cumberland, the next stop, Martinsburg, West Virginia, which is actually only about 20 miles. You'll take my word for it as I point somewhere, 20 miles that way. I think it's that way. That's actually an option, because there's obviously another Amtrak station there. It's not on the C&O like at all. So I think that it's possible if I had a couple of extra days, I could certainly get to Martinsburg in that time, assuming the C&O is not so bad. So that's another possibility. Or I could come to the cabin. There's lots of different options. Cabin, where I'm at right now. Next one, Harpers Ferry and Brunswick. This is sort of what I feel like kind of the outer limits of what's possible, unless conditions are really near perfect and my riding is really strong. The next stop would be DC. And that would be sort of the outer stretch goal. If I'm riding really, really strong, I'm going to be able to do a complete through ride on all of this, not have to take the train back. But I've got all of these different bailout options along the way. Should I want to take advantage of them or need to take advantage of them, depending on how things go? I've got a couple of questions that have been popping up here in the chat box, so I'm going to jump right in there. Kim says that we call it the Steel City Loop. That is true, yes. I've really enjoyed bicycling in Pittsburgh. It's really quite fantastic. 72 or an 80-mile loop around Pittsburgh. Yeah, I've never done that specific loop, but I'm interested in doing that sometime. I think I would like that. Yeah, Kim also chimes in about the Dravos campsite. It's a really, really great campsite, as I mentioned, and I would argue one of my favorite ones on the entire Great Allegheny Passage. Vince LaGreco says that I did the Big Savage bypass in 2003 on a 3-speed Huffy, not too much fun. That sounds like a terrible time, but I'm glad you did it so that I don't have to. That is amazing. Ooh. And Kim asks, Big Savage normally closes in November. No, it has. Historically, I tried to look it up because I would love it if there was a historical record, and I thought that existed somewhere of what date each year Big Savage has been closed. Typically speaking, it will be closer to the beginning of December, but there has been in recent memory, if my memory serves correctly, which I would not bank on, people, it closed in November, early, relatively early. I feel like November 7th one year, which is really early. And that would be right in the ballpark of when I would be going. So that's a possibility. They close it down generally right before a weekend, or right on a weekend, when there's a lot of freezing conditions and there's a lot of precipitation. And the issue is that the moisture freezes and thaws within the Big Savage Tunnel, and it's super unsafe, and there's a lot of stuff about damage, I'm sure liability as well. It's kind of a bummer because it would be really great if they could keep that open year round, but it's understandable. It probably would be a headache of maintenance for them because it is very remote and very difficult to get to. Paul, getting forced off at Brunswick worked out. Towpath gone, the sign said beers in Leesburg. Yes, beers in Leesburg, by the way, is always a good plan. Yeah, the towpath, I don't know what's going on in Brunswick right now. I know that with the crazy rain, it's possible that that low-level area that I shot a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I should say, that might not be a good option. I know the Park Service has been working on that, but I haven't gotten eyes on that myself. A friend of the show, Preston, who's a local guy around here in West Virginia, he gets there every once in a while, but he hasn't laid eyes on it in a while either. So I'm curious if anybody has actually ridden up to see what's going on there, because that would be another impediment. In addition, Pawpaw Tunnel is closed for some scaling works. There's a big detour around that. A lot of stuff going on. So. And Kim, I think you may be right. Kim thinks that the CNO might not be in shape for doing this ride. I don't know. I think you may be right. The question would be, can I get to Harper's Ferry? That would probably be the best bet for me. I could get back from Brunswick as well, but you're right there. So that's a possibility. Paul mentions, ran into others in the same boat. This was early August. People were taking the train tracks. Terrible idea to take the train tracks. Check out my video. I've got a video on the YouTube channel about getting around. There is a very obvious and easier way, and it's definitely not taking the train tracks. That is not a great idea. If the water's really high, that may be the only way to do it, but those train tracks, they are very busily traveled, and CSX trains don't stop for nothing. I'm just here to tell you. Wanted to pivot one more to kind of before we leave this topic of my new tour here. There's going to be more coming. This whole ride feels like it's going to be super weather dependent. Early November is a weird time around here in this region. It tends to be on the wetter side, which of course will make things a lot more challenging. But also with the open-endedness of this, the fact that I've got basically a chunk of time that's probably more than just doing the Great Allegheny Passage, but the CNO may not be, as we've been talking about, and with everybody else kind of here talking as well. CNO may not be in a great shape to be able to pull something off, particularly on the little clown bike. So I may just decide, based on weather conditions and trail conditions, that it's not going to be possible to do any kind of an add-on with the CNO. We'll see how it all goes. I am certainly going to be keeping you all into it. This should be a fun tour journal, and it's going to be coming to you as sort of the closeout of the year, which is kind of the fun part of doing this, is that we'll be closing out 2018 with one kind of multi-part tour journal. So that is the new tour. Again, if you're here in the live show room, stick around as we finish off the rest of the podcast here. We've got Gear Talk coming, but we're going to be doing a little tour of the little clown bike itself, my Brompton, and I'm going to show you the new setup, live here. But that's it for this particular tour announcement. All right, now I'm going to take a sip of beer. This is the time you'd hear the because we're going to transition to a new segment. But I get to have a sip of beer because I've been good and I've been yammering here for what feels like 30 minutes now. All right. Everybody having a good time? Thank you all for chiming in and enjoying this fine live show as well. Let's see who. Yeah, Kim, it is very illegal. Those tracks. It's illegal. You can get a fine, and CSX is definitely empowered legally to charge, and it's several $100s. Not the least of which is the fact that there are heavy trains that will come and run you over. That's kind of the thing. So, yeah. Thank you, Noah. I do deserve it. Thank you. Brian says, my dad had a 3-speed Huffy. That thing would turn anybody into a non-cyclist. You know, it's funny. I've seen so many people ride bikes out there just sort of randomly, especially the Oregon coast, man, just junker type bikes. And it's amazing. You could be on the worst bike and it still gets you around. I mean, even with terrible gearing and chains that rattle away, they're still efficient little machines. They're kind of impressive. But even, apparently the 3-speed Huffy isn't, we do not have fans of the 3-speed Huffy in this room tonight. Kim says daylight times versus bike riding times. Oh yeah, and that's something I didn't mention and probably should have. I'm glad you did. Uh, this is obviously in between segments here, but yeah, one of the other issues is that it's after daylight savings time. I think it's the week after daylight savings time ends. So I'm gonna have less time, less sunlight to be able to do my riding. Now, I don't think that it's so little light that it's gonna be a problem from the perspective of I'm gonna run out of it. Based in the type of mileage that I want to do. I tend to be an early riser when I am on bike tour, but you just never know. So, all right, let's see. Paul Anderson, those 4 were all 60 plus, hung with them in Leesburg, obviously crazy. Cheers. Vince LaGreco, that 2003 ride on the Huffy was my first and only tour on that bike. Huffy's not getting a lot of love tonight. Poor Huffy. All right, folks. Mostly because the pedal fell off in Myersdale. That sounds like a limerick of some kind. No, I'm not inviting people to make limericks with pedals in Myersdale. Thank you very much. All right, the next segment is going to be the gear talk. We're going to be doing a little bit of talk about fall touring and gear and just some thoughts and ideas that I've got on fall touring. And Kim, I'm not going to forget you talking about shoes. I may even do that first because otherwise my brain that you see right here, it's encased in this skull, is not good. It's just straight up not good. I forget things all the time, so I'm going to talk shoes first. Next up on the show is Gear Talking. Gear Talk is where we talk about the best named segment in the world. We talk about gear. This is going to be the fall touring edition, and I am going to talk all about kind of my ideas, my suggestions, my experience with touring in the fall, and some ideas on what I would recommend that you bring along with you for your next fall bike tour. We're gonna start off by talking about shoes and shoe covers and things along those lines, based on a suggestion from Kim in the chat room here. I am not a huge proponent of, first of all, I do platform pedals. And I mean, shoes gets into the whole thing because if you got shoes, you get into pedals. A lot of people will either have clip-ins or straps or things like that. I am a proponent of just regular old flat platform pedals. And as a result, I don't have to worry about what types of shoes that I've got. Now, a lot of, then you get into the whole thing about should you have waterproof shoes? What do you have very particular types of needs with all of that? What I have found is that no matter what I do with my foot covers, my shoes, whatever foot apparel I have, whatever type of waterproofing I put on it, around it, near it, my footwear always gets wet. Period. End of sentence. If it is wet out, if it's raining, they get wet. I know that there are a lot of people who have had much better luck and much better time of it with particular brands and things like that, and certain types of gaiters, and I just haven't. So my solution in all of this is to use, basically I wear the same types of shoes that I always wear. I tend to wear like a trail shoe, a running shoe. And if it's a really bad wet day, I will wear waterproof socks from, let's see, Showers Pass. They are amazing. They're like wearing a wetsuit, quite frankly. Now, if water gets in there, which they can, then there's no way for it to get out either. But it's sort of like a wetsuit in the sense that it kind of gets warm in there with your whatever limited body heat you have in your extremities there. But I found that they work really, really well. I tested the heck out of them with that Washington tour this past spring. I've also done it in the fall, and I find that even in colder temperatures, they work really, really well. They're not so tight that they don't allow circulation, because that's the one thing is sometimes with waterproof stuff, things are so cloistered that you don't get blood flow very well in your feet, and that means your feet just get cold. So I go with my regular shoes and with those super awesome waterproof socks, and that is what works for me. I think that there are 100,000 different solutions, but that's what I've been working with, and I kind of like them. They're not the cheapest things in the world, as with anything from Showers Pass, but as I'm going to talk about in a little bit here, when it comes to rain gear, actually I'll talk about rain gear next. Some things I want to talk about you spend the money on, and the socks are one thing. The next thing that I say spend the money on is the rain jacket. I have found that I have gone through so many different types of jackets for cycle touring. And I've always been disappointed with them, especially the ones that claim to be breathable, waterproof and breathable. I found that I've been disappointed with almost all of them except for one, and that is again by Showers Pass. They are an Oregon company. They do really, really well. There's something great about their engineering, their design, the stuff that they use, the materials that they work with, the pit zips, all of that. They're on the expensive side compared to a rando jacket that you're going to get from any rando store. But they are fantastic, and I really, really recommend them. I thought I lost my jacket a few tours ago, and I was just devastated because I was like, it was like my friend. It's like losing your friend. It's one of those things that I think is the best piece of rain gear that I've got. Everything else, frankly, I can skimp on a little bit. I found that rain pants, again, I've never had a really good luck with them. I'm sure if I bought the Showers Pass ones, that'd be fantastic. But what I found is I just bought a pair of essentially kind of outdoor pants, and I just waterproof. I waterproof sprayed it. There's a word for it. It's tech wash. There's tech wash, but I actually did the even cheaper kind, the spray kind, the 3M spray on it. That worked out really, really well, and it's maintained its waterproof, or at least water repellent properties over the course of basically the last year or so. And it's great because then they're comfortable, they're great, it gets on, it's your whole legs. Frankly, the place where you get wettest when you're riding on a tour is right on top of your thighs. And if that's the area that you can keep really dry, or at least kind of have water shut off a little bit, that's going to be your best bet. I know that Aaron from the Sprocket podcast, that he was trying out, and he swears by these, they're almost like front chaps, for lack of a better. I wish I could remember the name of the product, but it basically just, they're waterproofed layer that sits over your regular pants. And it basically is in the place where it needs to be for water to shut off. That's something that I would be interested in trying sometime, but I know that he's been a real fan of those. I'm not sure about, from a touring perspective, if that would be as great of an idea. I just like the idea of having pants that I can kind of throw on. Oh, by the way, they never really get wet. I just sort of shake them out and the water just flies off, and then I can kind of have them hang someplace. In the morning, yeah, maybe they're not the most comfortable thing to put on, but once they warm up, you're all set. That's what I really like. I think that's basically what I want to say about rain gear and all of that. I'm going to go back to clothing in a second because I already talked about the wool sweater, but we'll get back to that in a moment. Wanted to check in the chat room here. Rod says, had some Pearl Izumi SPD shoes filled up with water like a pool, drilled a few 1/8 inch holes in the sole by the cleat, water in, water out. That's a really good, that's an interesting idea there. I'm glad that worked, to have a drain hole in your shoe. I mean, sometimes simple solutions are the best ones. Noah Schroer, I am definitely a cheapskate, tend to buy the cheap stuff and then get pissed at myself for not sucking it up and getting the gear that will last. That said, I am a fan of the poncho for rain. I am too for kind of around town. In fact, it was raining today. My girlfriend had an appointment and she swears by the poncho. She does really, really well with that. I'm sort of 50-50 on the poncho because I don't like how it blows. On my larger bike, it doesn't fit around my butterfly handlebars as well. I think that's just a bad poncho rather than ponchos being bad. In any event, bad poncho. That's going to be the name of my next album, by the way. Covers legs too and makes a mini tarp when needed. Yes, no, absolutely. That's another thing, is that it can be actually an emergency shelter, which is kind of amazing. Let's see. Rain jacket is important, Kim. Yes, absolutely. That's why I'm a big fan of the Showers Pass. I'm not endorsed by them. They are a great company, though. I like their stuff. Fully envious of Noah's poncho last spring. Got a poncho, but haven't used it yet. Too nervous for the new Brooks saddle, from Paul. Hey, Paul. One thing that I would tell you to do is to get a cover for your Brooks. I've got one, and I wish I could remember the name of the company that made it. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. But they do custom ones, and it's orange and looks really cool, and it's like bulletproof canvas, and it just keeps everything super dry. That's something that I think would be a really good idea. So I'll make sure to get the guy. I think he's in the Midwest someplace, but yeah, he does some really cool work. So check that out. Non-bulky layer, sleeping bag. Let's talk about the sleeping bag. For a long time, I resisted down. I was of the old school, like back in the day, down was one of those things that mountaineers would use, and the type of hiking that I was doing, it was sort of like, oh, but if it gets wet, it gets destroyed, and it doesn't keep you warm. All of these things are technically true. I'm here to tell you, though, they've really made a big improvement in the type of down that is being used, how they treat down. I don't think I'll ever go back for a warm bag using down. If you're vegan, if you're vegan enough that you're going beyond just the dietary restrictions, that you don't want to use any animal products in anything that you use, they do make synthetic bags that have somewhat comparable warmth ratings. They tend to be a little bit bulkier than down. They tend not to pack as small as down, and they're not as light as down. So if you're cool with down, I think it's fantastic, and I got one that I've been singing the praises of. It's by Hike and Bike, I believe is the name of the company. Really inexpensive, and I tell you, the quality is super high. That's one thing that a lot of people say spend the money on. This one ended up being a really high quality bag. I think it was 99 bucks, and it's rated down to 32 degrees, which frankly is about as cold as I like to camp in anyways. So it's a good bag. You can check that out. I think they're on Amazon and whatnot. Hike and Bike, but down bags, they just go down to almost nothing. They are really fantastic. Quilts are really good as well. Vince just chimed in and says he's got a great down quilt from Hammock Gear. Yeah, I mean, the brand is, some quilt ones are better than others, or I'm sorry, some downs are better than others. You got to look at the fill and all of that kind of stuff. I would definitely recommend going, and if you've got friends, people that you know that have down bags, check them out, get an idea of it. Go to your REI if you got one near you, or your local camping store. Feel the difference between them all, but I have to say, I've been really, really pleased with what I got, and that literally made all the difference in the world in terms of reducing down my pack size, because before, my sleep kit was a major piece of what I had to bring in terms of the bulk on my bike, and that, of course, more than weight is what a limiting factor. Those are the two limiting factors: weight and bulk. And I think you run out of space from bulk quicker than you have too heavy of a load to carry, at least in my experience. So sleeping bag, I'd say go for down, especially in the fall. Non-bulky layers, and so we're going back to clothes. Sorry, we're a little out of order here, but thin wool sweaters, a merino wool, again, this is something you're gonna have to spend a little more money on, but then sometimes there are synthetics that do really well that will mimic what wool can do. A lot of people swear by wool for everything. I like it mixed in. It's just one of those things that I can never justify going all wool all the time on all of it. I tend to warm up very quickly when I'm cycling. So frankly, I will strip down to generally almost even a base layer, and sometimes a base, if it's cold, if it's truly cold, a base layer and then a wool layer on top of it. But that's very rare. I usually generate so much heat that if I'm in my rain jacket and a base layer, that's all I need once I get going. In fact, I will force myself to get on a bike cold, knowing full well that I'm gonna be warm within 5 minutes or less. What I hate is when I go, once I get going, once I get some momentum, I hate stopping to take stuff off, especially if it's raining, because you got to take the rain layer off and then the other layer, and how's that going to stay dry? I would much rather start with where I know I'm going to end up rather than be warm and then get hot and then have to stop and then pull over. That's my own personal preference. I think a lot of folks don't run nearly as hot as I do when I ride. I run stupid hot. It's just one of the things that I've got, and I've probably yammered about that on about 137 episodes of the show. Let's see here. Puffy jacket. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I just talked about the wonders of down. I resisted the whole puffy jacket thing for a while too, because I was like, all right, yeah, that's way too cool for me. So I was like, no, not gonna do it. I'm cool with what I got, and I'm cool with the layers that I got. No, when I got a puffy vest, because I didn't feel like I needed the full jacket. And it was awesome, and it is fantastic, and it balls down to about the size of a softball. It gives so much added warmth. It is fantastic, and I really like having it. That is an absolutely integral part of my fall touring kit because once it gets cold at night, I throw that on, I'm all good. If I'm on the coast in the summer, Pacific coast, sometimes it can drop down into the low 50s, throw that on. You probably saw that for the Oregon tour this year. I brought that along, threw that on. It's great. It is so light and so stupid easy to just throw in any bag. It's really great. That's another thing. It doesn't have to be very expensive. Amazon Essentials has both a full-size jacket and the vest. I got the vest, and it was, I can't remember how much it was, but compared to other jackets out there, it was really inexpensive. I would recommend taking a look at that. I've liked it. They come in a bunch of different colors. I chose black because they didn't have orange. If it doesn't come in orange, I get black. That's basically what I do. Do I need to say you gotta get a hat? No? Okay. Make sure you have a hat. A hat is good. A hat is good for at night. A hat is good for during the day. Get a hat. It's good. It covers up your head. It's good for you. It keeps you warm, especially during the fall. But you should have a hat. Okay, there we go. One last tip. I've talked about this in a variety of different contexts, and I think I just mentioned it. I'm not sure if I've ever said, hey, this is a really good idea. So this is like full-fledged, Tim's pedal shift tip to you. I always have a set of clothes that I have as camp clothes. Not everybody does this. I do it kind of religiously because when I get to camp, whether I can get a shower or bathe or clean up at all, it feels so good to get out completely of everything that I was wearing during the day and into something that is just like a little more human. And those clothes are only used in camp. I do not wear those at all cycling, ever. I will put on wet stuff before I put that stuff on for a tour. The only exception would be if it's my last day and I know I'm going someplace where I will end up and jumping in a shower and throwing stuff in laundry. It's the only time I ever do anything with that. And I feel like that it does one really important thing. It makes sure that you've got something, assuming you keep it in a dry bag, because I say you keep it in your sleep kit, and my sleep kit's in a dry bag. So all of this is 100% dry. And that is so critically important on days when it is wet and cold. Once you start getting into hypothermia range, having something dry to get into is really, really important. And kind of a caveat to all of this is I also have a camp towel, one of those things that you can wring out. I actually use old car chamois. Well, not old ones, I buy them new, but they're car chamois. They're so much cheaper than camp towels, and they're made of the same stuff, turns out. So I would recommend having one of those to make sure that you can at least dry off and then get into something dry. Whether you're doing it inside your tent or you're someplace else, man, it makes such a big difference. It makes a real big difference psychologically as well at the end of the day. If you've been cold and miserable and wet, but you can get dry and warm at the end of the day, man, that just makes things so much better. Not just for kind of ending the misery of maybe a cold and wet day, but getting yourself psychologically prepared to get back on that bike the next day, especially if it's also going to be cold and wet. Done a few of those rides myself, and it's kind of nice to have that break. It just gives you that space. Your tent may not be super dry, but you will be, and you'll be warm. And warm and dry after a wet day, man, there's nothing better. So those are all sort of my tips there. I'll go through them again. We talked about the shoes. We talked about down sleeping bag. Talk about rain gear. Spend more on the jacket, is my opinion. Your mileage may vary. I think the other type of rain gear, you can probably get away with spending a little bit less on. Non-bulky layers, tucking your thin wool sweaters, your merino wool, your synthetics, puffy jacket or vest, especially if it's on the colder side. Folks wear hats, bring hats, have hats, and then of course the having camp clothes at the end of the day. Those are all my tips for touring in the fall from a gear perspective. Okay, and that's the end of that little segment there, and that'll actually close out the show. So, let's see here. I wanted to go in here, preaching the choir on puffy jackets. Yes, we'll buff for a hat. Yes, I don't need my neck covered as much because I run incredibly hot. But if you run a little on the cold side and you wear a lot of different, what do you call it? Scarves, that's what the kids call them. If you do stuff like that, then yeah, I think a buff is probably a good idea. Let me get the thing in the background going here. That tells me that I was doing this for more than an hour, so where are we at? 59 minutes and 49 seconds. Will you look at that? How about that? Well, so I'll do the rest of the show in post. I think that this is now a fun and good time to do a couple of things. Number one, I am going to stop the recording on the microphone, which I'm going to do right now. Haha, done. Okay, thank you everybody for hanging out with me for the show. That's always a fun thing. Now I'm going to get up and we're going to do a little tour here of the bike. So I'm going to shift the studio lights, aka my reading book light. And yeah, I think that that'll do. Stay with me for a second here. Again, sausage, see how it's made. All right. Okay, so now we're going to do the little clown bike. And I'm going to turn the camera around so the audio may very well change. All right, there we go. Little clown bike and my kitchen in the background. So I wanted to go through a few things here. And oh, thanks, Patrick. I'm glad you enjoyed the show. And yeah, and folks, if you don't have time, this will probably only be about a 5-minute little bit of an after show, maybe a little bit more, depending if there's some more questions. But you know, I'm not going to be offended if you have to bail. That's totally cool. But here we go. I think I'm going to start with the front of the bike because this is sort of the thing that I've already done, and it's just sort of a review. And again, the lighting is not super good, so I may have to, let me add a little bit of light here as we circle around here. Bear with me. You can see the little clown bike from all different angles. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit better. But we'll look at it from this angle. Okay, so this is the front of the bike, and what you'll see is, yes, Brian, it is the VIP party. So here you can see the bike, and I've got it up on a rack, so it's just a little bit easier to see. But the thing about this is, you'll notice that this is the luggage rack here. And this is, you can buy this separately and you can basically fashion anything on it. I've used basically zip ties and carabiners to attach all sorts of things to this. This is sort of my summer setup. This is a non-waterproof, I think it's made by Avenir. Yeah, it's, you know, the cheap little kind of bike bags. This one is actually a rack bag that's made to go over a rear rack, but it actually worked out really nicely on this. I'm not going to use this for this tour. What I would much prefer to do is to use my old school Ortlieb, the orange front roller, and it attaches onto here. It comes out a little bit further and a little bit further down, and it has a much higher capacity, and of course it's waterproof. And that will be a really great thing. That's going to carry, as I mentioned before, the food, clothes, a lot of sort of the random stuff, and of course stuff that maybe I would need access to while I'm riding, including some tools. One thing that's great about this bike is that I've actually got a toolkit that fits inside of here. So if I do have a need for tools, then I do have tools not necessarily in that bag. If I have a need for tools on the Brompton, that means something pretty catastrophic has happened generally. I hope that that's not the case. But it can happen, and I'm prepared for it if I need it. So the real trick here is going to be on the rear. Actually, let me just do it from this angle. And you should be able to see pretty well from here. Number one here is, you may have recognized this bag from the Oregon tour. This is a kind of a simple dry bag, roll top. It's got a nice handle on it. It's being secured here by the Brompton's two bungee systems here, along with the other dry bag. This is my tent. And the great thing about this is that it keeps it all dry and safe and secure if it's wet outside and the tent is dry. But if the tent does get wet or whatever, I can keep it segregated from the rest of the stuff. I can even put other wet things inside of this. This bag can actually hold much more than the tent. It can also hold maybe a few other things, some wet clothes and things like that as well as necessary. So that's great, and it works really, really well. This was really inexpensive, and I was really happy that I found it. And oh, by the way, orange, we love that. Last but not least, we've got the tried and true event bag. Man, these are just so great. This contains my sleep kit. This has got the down sleeping bag. This has got an REI inflatable mattress. Is that what the kids are calling them? Yeah. And it's got a few other things as well, sleep clothes and things like that. Look how small that gets. You know, just it's about my hand width and diameter there, and it cinches way down. The nice thing you may notice right here is the heel strike situation is so much better. When I had that big backpack, which would go from down here all the way up to about here, not only was it a lot of bulk, but I often found that I would have heel strike problems. Here, I'm just not going to have that. You can just see how much more clearance that I've got and the ability to get away from it. If nothing comes that much further past these wheels here, the likelihood of heel strike isn't that much lower. So by having the wider, bulkier thing in the back, the skinnier thing in the front, what do I end up with? A lot less weight, a lot less bulk, and it is everything that I need. So the front will have clothes, we'll have some gear, cook kit, some real basics. The rear is going to have basically shelter and sleep kit, and that's it. So you'll notice that this is a much lighter looking ride than before, and I'm really excited to try this out. I think that the fact that this is lighter, that the fact that this is going to be much like the Oregon ride, look at that profile, that's pretty good. I'm going to be able to cut through a lot of wind that way, and it's going to be a lot better from that perspective as well. Now, one more thing that I wanted to highlight was, of course, the tire width. As I mentioned, these are 35s. Those are probably going to be just fine for the Great Allegheny Passage. I would prefer to be on wider tires, but to be perfectly honest, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I think that if I was going to have any problems, I was going to have problems with them on 35s as well, or excuse me, on 38s as well. So that's basically it as I blind you all with my lights. Let me see here. I'm going to turn the camera back around. Yeah, so that's basically it. I think that I'm going to do another probably video that's going to show this all off. I'm going to probably I'm going to clearly do at least one more podcast before the trip that's going to do a preview like I always do. And then, of course, after the ride, it's going to be all tour journals. So we're probably going to have that well into Thanksgiving and maybe even beyond. So we'll just see how that all goes. With 5.5 days of riding, you never know. It could go through the end of the year. So anyways, thank you all. I'm really, really excited to have you along for the ride. Thanks so much for joining the live show. Ooh, wow, it changed again. See? This was my favorite new thing, putting the thing on the TV. I like that. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being a part of all this. This will be a part of Pedalshift project number 137 that will be coming out to your pods. It'll be casting to your pods this Thursday at 7 a.m. So thanks for being a part of it. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for all you do. Have a great night. And we'll see you on the next episode. Another live show. I think maybe we're going to do another one before the end of the year too. So stay tuned for all that. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good one. This is the hard part because I can never remember how to turn it off. There it is. No, cancel. You would think that I would know how to do this. Oh, X.